Hello there, and welcome back to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I'm so happy that you are here with me. I forgot to light my candle, but I'm going to do it right now. Last week we talked about lack of emotional safety or emotional insecurity. And so this is part 2 from last week's episode. So last week we talked about the signs and the patterns, the ways that emotional insecurity infiltrates our relationships without us even realizing it. But awareness is only step 1, as you guys know, based on my 5 pillars of transformation. Awareness is number 1. But today we're going to be focusing on something equally important, which what actually creates emotional safety? What can you do, right? Because truthfully, emotionally safe relationships usually don't just happen by accident, right? They really are built through small, consistent behaviors over time. It's us learning to relate to each other in ways that create trust, respect, honesty, repair, which is what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to be walking you through 6 things that you can practice to build more emotional safety in your relationships in today's video. So before we get into it, if you're new to the channel, thank you for being here. I love it. I appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss anything when I roll out new stuff, which is twice a week. All right, let's jump on into today's content, shall we? I think we shall. For a refresher on why we care, emotional safety and security is truly the cornerstone, the foundation of any healthy relationship. Without it, there cannot be a healthy relationship. So that's that. So what do we need to create security? We need to respect boundaries and consent. So emotionally safe relationships, there is room for us to be individuals, right? Boundaries aren't looked at as like rejection or something mean. Boundaries are information in a healthy relationship. So they help us understand what feels comfortable, what feels supportive and respectful to the people we love. This is why we have, why do we have love languages? Why do we talk about that? Why was that so popular? And I actually still think it's relevant today. The 5 love languages is because we're all so different. So if we endlessly treat our partner the way we want to be treated, but never really dial into what makes them feel loved, that's what we're talking about here. Is that understanding, respecting boundaries and consent? What can it look like in the relationship? Respecting someone's need for space, right? Asking instead of assuming something. Honoring emotional, physical, sexual, and financial limits, right? Because we're all different. Letting someone say no without punishing them for it. Because in unsafe emotional relationships, there's a lot of being withdrawn in anger, stonewalling as punishment. So we do not want to be doing it. What happens is when boundaries are respected consistently, what happens in the relationship? Trust grows, which means that safety grows. Those of us with high functioning codependency, even if you're in recovery like me, this can really be a deeply healing experience, learning to trust someone in a relationship. Because in childhood, if you learned that your needs were not important, they were like inconvenient for other people, or if the way that you stayed safe was by not having any needs. I just remember getting into my relationship with my husband and how I was so shocked that he knew how to take care of me. And then, of course, I had to learn how to let him take care of me. And I mean in the mutual, normal way that healthy relationships are. I don't mean take care of me like I'm a baby. I mean, he was a safe person. I could be myself. I could be upset. I could be upset with him, and he wouldn't punish me. I could tell the truth about how I felt about something, and he wouldn't punish me. And this was sort of a new experience for me. And it took a while for me to be able to trust it. But over time, because that's the other thing with emotionally trustworthy people and safety, they're the same over time, right? And in that example of boundaries and preferences, what we learn is that you're allowed to have needs, right? You're allowed to be different. I've talked about this before, but I'm an empath. I'm a highly sensitive person. Like I've got a lot of specific needs, like lighting to be a particular way. I can't deal with loud noises. Things can't smell weird. I need soft everything. Like, and for some people, they would be like, oh, you're just extra, you know? Vic never made me feel that way. He always remembers to shut off the kitchen light because I hate it. He doesn't use the lights that I can't stand. He's just always thinking. I can't explain it. Like rather than it being annoying the way that I am, he just is like loving about the way that I am. And listen, I do the same for him, but I just remember in the beginning finding it so amazing that I could like exhale and things wouldn't fall apart. It was okay. All right, number 2, in building more emotional safety in your relationships, communicate directly and with kindness, right? Our nervous system, it's listens, right, with energy and words, right? So someone's words are one thing, but the tone of voice, the facial expression matters. The energy that they're bringing matters. And emotional safety grows when our communication is clear and congruent and direct. So you know what I mean when I say congruent? Our words are matching our face, our body, what we're saying, we're leaning in. So if you say, I'm fine, but your face looks like this, and your energy is like, that is incongruent. Those things don't match. They don't go together. So when you're with someone who talks true, everything is congruent. So this can look like saying what we actually mean, just telling the truth, just talking true. Addressing issues instead of acting them out indirectly, right? Because here's the thing with feelings. Tough emotions, frustrations, we're going to only do one of two things. We're only going to talk them out or act them out. That's it. Those are the two. So talking them out is obviously way more productive. Another thing, it can look like letting your body language match your words. So instead of saying I'm fine when you're not fine, saying I'm kind of upset, I'm a little bummed, right? Telling the truth so that our body language tells the truth about how we feel. Because when we say I'm fine, but we cross our arms or we turn around and we walk out of the room, that does not match. And taking responsibility for our own emotional energy, right? Sometimes I'm in a mood that has nothing to do with my husband or my friend or my sister, right? And I have to take responsibility for that energy just like you do. So being able to just say, right, and I'll include this, you guys, in the guide that I created that goes along with this episode, terricole.com/guide. Instead of the I'm fine of it all, you might just say something feels off to me and I want to talk about it. That's it. And the thing when you're in a safe relationship is that you don't have to have all the answers, right? The person's not like waiting for a fight. I can say something feels off and my husband can go, all right, well, what do you think it is? Rather than, why is there always a problem? Or you're always picking a fight, or like there's a million responses that are not safe. But when you think about direct communication, it is clarity. Right? It creates a clarity between you. What does Brene Brown say? Clear is kind, right? And also, clear helps the nervous system not be on high alert because we can trust what the person is saying and we understand what they're saying. Number 3, to build more safety, practice deep listening. I like to call it athletic listening sometime because feeling heard is one of the most regulating experiences we can have in relationships. Long before I was a psychotherapist, I knew this about myself. I didn't know what it was called, but I always knew that I needed to be accurately known, partly because my father wound that I have is that my father didn't know me. So there's that. But specific, like I can't explain it. There's something even now to this day at 62. There is something, if I feel like someone is misperceiving me, and I don't mean the public, I mean people in my life, right? Obviously, if you have an online life or a public life, people are going to misperceive you all the time, and who gives a shit? But I'm talking about people in your real life. It would drive me crazy if I didn't feel like the person understood. So I definitely needed to end up in a long-term relationship with someone who's willing to talk out a lot of things so that I felt sure that he understood what I was talking about. Safe relationships are built. How? when people feel emotionally received, not just tolerated, which is different, right? Someone just being like, I'm white knuckling it through this conversation because you need to talk about your feelings. That does not feel safe, right? So what does it look like? Good listening. What does it really look like? Or athletic listening? Well, we know the basic stuff: making eye contact, staying present instead of planning your defense, right? We're not going to be a wait to talker, as one of my old friends used to say. This is not a debate. We need to know the difference between a debate and a dialogue because they're not the same thing. Being a good listener means you ask thoughtful questions. You reflect back what you heard. Like, did I understand you? This is what I heard you say. Is this what you meant? And letting someone finish before we respond. In a lot of my courses, I teach about expansive listening. And one of the things is that we ask expansive questions. And we say, is there more you want to say about that? Because what does that do? Like, the most important coin you'll ever spend is your time. And when someone is talking and it's important to them, and you say, is there more you want to say about that? And then what happened? And then how'd you feel? And then what? And I'm not saying, it doesn't have to be like the Spanish Inquisition, but there is something about being truly interested in what someone is saying. That creates safety to be vulnerable, right? If I don't think you are actually interested in what I'm saying, I am not interested in being vulnerable to you. When someone cuts you off, why is it so painful? At least for me, is because it tells me they're not listening, that they're more focused. And sometimes people with ADHD, there's lots of different divergent, right? You might be neurodivergent, and that might, impact your ability to be a great listener. So I take those things into consideration, and I'm not trying to sweep it with this huge brush. We do have to take into consideration people's capacity, but it's important to feel like you're heard. And it may look different if you're in a relationship with someone who is neurodivergent, When people feel safe, though, when you feel safe, when your partner feels safe, bringing concerns, bringing something up. Resentment you don't let a lot of grass grow on the resentment, which is why I also always say that I think couples should meet every week or every other week over coffee, over breakfast. Vic and I do it on Sundays, where it's just I call it the State of the Union, which is where we're kind of like, hey, how we doing? Do we need to do something different? Is there something missing? Could I be doing something better? As Gay Hendricks, he's so great. He's written so many Upper Limit Problems, so many amazing books. He talks about his wife Katie and says that he asks her, how could I love you better today? Right? How could I love you better? Which is a really loving and open thing to say. What we're saying to someone when we're listening actively is that you matter, that your experience matters. And I always say to Vic, I want to know what you think. I would ask him the most random things, and he'd be like, hello, everything is okay. Nothing's wrong. Or he'd say, if I say, what are you thinking about? He'd say, nothing important. I'm like, but everything you think is important to me. I'm just curious. You don't have to tell me, and it took a while for him to get that I just want to know what's going on inside of your mind. I'm actually interested in that. He's like, well, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, okay, but I don't care. I still want to know. All right, fourth thing we can do is practice honesty and transparency, right? Because what happens? Trust grows and thrives in an open environment, right? And it doesn't mean, like I just said, every passing thought has to be, it's like, you must tell me, right? You're allowed to have emotional privacy as well. But emotional safety really does grow when there's a sense of transparency and honesty in the relationship. This can just look like being open with your feelings, right? Telling the truth, even about the small things, right? Keeping your partner informed instead of leaving them guessing. This is what's happening, or this is what's going on with me. Addressing issues instead of hiding them. Not waiting until something is out of control or that you're so pissed off, right? These small moments, they're almost like micro moments of honesty and transparency. This is what builds trust over time. This is how we create evidence of trustworthiness. Because really, a lot of times it's not necessarily like these big betrayals of like infidelity or something like that that ends up really damaging the emotional safety in a relationship. It's the repeated experience of feeling like something is being withheld or that the way you feel doesn't matter, that the person isn't interested in how you feel. So, openness creates this solid ground to build a relationship on. All right, number 5, lead with curiosity instead of assumptions. And I think that especially in long-term relationships, we really have to keep an eye out for assumptions coming in because it is so easy to, because we've had so many experiences with this one person. Vic and I have been together almost 30 years, you know? So one of the healthiest shifts that we can make in your relationship in general is moving away from judgment and towards curiosity to the best of your ability. So instead of, ugh, what is wrong with them? Maybe what might be happening underneath this behavior? What is going on for them? So again, this isn't making excuses for bullshit behavior. I'm not talking about that. But I am saying giving the benefit of the doubt. Like stop immediately villainizing people, right? Making them be the wrong one. Another thing that happens for emotional safety to grow is we have to be able to be imperfect. You have to be able to make mistakes and be sorry and have a container that is the relationship that can tolerate making mistakes because we're people and we're going to make mistakes. But it's so hard to do it or admit that you're wrong if your partner or you are holding a grudge about mistakes that have been made. I really think that one of the most important things in building emotional safety is just being able to own your shit. Just say, I was bitchy before, I'm sorry. I made an assumption it was wrong or whatever it is. You know, and part of what we can do to shift this though is, what does it look like? All right, checking in with the story that we're telling ourselves about why the person did what they did. How about asking questions before we react so that we can actually respond? As I said before, giving the benefit of the doubt. Remembering that everyone brings their old downloaded blueprints, their old wounds into the relationship. It is important that we understand where our partner comes from, like in life, in the world, what they experienced, right? My husband is the son of, war survivors, right? That's a particular life experience that he had. I've read so many books on secondary trauma. When we first met, I probably read 15 books because I wanted to understand how did his parents' persecution and imprisonment, how did this impact him as a person? What will it make him sensitive to? Of course, we talked about it as well. And this is also where you can use the 3 cues for clarity to help, right? When you may be having a transference or an amplified response to your partner. Who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? Why is this dynamic familiar? And don't worry, I'll put all of that in the guide for you, terricole.com/guide. The 6th thing I want to say is building trust through follow through and accountability. You got to do what you say you're going to do. This is the way that trust is built behaviorally, right? It's not the words. I always say this to my therapy clients when they're like, well, they said we should travel to Paris and we should do all these things. I'm like, listen, did they call you Friday? Because they were supposed to call you Friday. Like, did that happen? It's promises and intentions. That's not what it's about. Behavior tells the true story of what's happening, and consistency, right? Emotionally safe people just fucking do what they say they're going to do. And when they don't, they cleanly take accountability. That's it, right? There's no other answer for that than that. So what does that look like? Yes, doing what we say we're going to do. Repairing quickly when we miss something or get it wrong. Owning our mistakes without being defensive. Showing consistent effort over time. Because the truth is, the daily stuff that we do in our relationships, these teeny moments, this is what builds safety, right? It's our everyday stuff. Yes, sometimes it's peak experiences and maybe you travel or maybe you had a lovely honeymoon or a beautiful wedding or whatever it is that you had, right? Maybe you had some amazing peak experiences. That is not 99.9% of your life, is literally not that. It is emptying the dishwasher, making the bed, and saying thank you to whoever did whatever, right? It's returning the text in a timely fashion. It's remembering what your person talks about. My husband is an artist. I always know what jobs he's working on. How's that job going for Alta magazine? How's that job going for Rolling Stone? Did you come up with the idea? I don't forget what he's working on, because that's his life. He remembers. I have a million players in my life, and he works to be like, oh yeah, that was the one you saw last March, right? This is all effort. But it's what creates safety, because what are we saying to each other? How you feel, what you think, what you experience in life matters to me. I'm in this foxhole with you, right? We are in this together. So also being able to just say you're sorry is an important part of building trust and following through. The last thing I want to say about this, because I'm going over time, because I didn't realize how much I was going to say about that. Anyway, those were the 6 ways we can build more emotional safety in our life. And if we boiled it down to 3 things, what would they be? Consistency, responsiveness, right? Which is emotional attunement. So we're being dialed in without being hypervigilant about it, but dialed into. Noticing when something feels off, checking in, right? Letting ourselves be emotionally available instead of emotionally avoidant. It could be as simple as, you seem upset, do you want to talk about it? Or, I'm realizing something hurt my feelings. Responsiveness, what does it say to our partners? I see you, right? I'm willing to stay connected even when it's a little hard. And then the last thing, if I were just bringing it into 3 things, is respect. There has to be room for 2 entirely whole people in relationships. You may have different opinions, dreams, needs, feelings, wants, but respect means we don't control, fix, or manage each other, that we support each other's growth while staying responsible for our own emotional experience, right? What does respect say? I can love you without controlling you, which means I accept you. And that is love, my friends. That is love. That is healthy. If we have more time, well, I'll tell it quick. I sometimes tell this story. Some of you who know me for a long time probably know it, but my husband years ago, before he was ever embedded in war zones, which he does that, he got a call about going to Afghanistan. And this was at the height of the fighting, the height of the war. And he was going to be going, he had an opportunity to be embedded with a medevac unit right at the front. So this would be a very dangerous assignment, basically, to go. And he said to me, I went into the studio and I go, oh, who is that? And he said, oh, I got asked to do this thing. He said, but I told them I couldn't do it. And I said, why? And he said, well, we've been traveling and I didn't make that much money last month or whatever. He came up with reasons. And I said, wait a minute. Do you want to do it? And he said, oh yeah, it's like a lifelong dream to be embedded in a war zone, which sounds, I know, insane. But, it's a very particular artistic talent to draw in the moment. It's, on the spot drawing. Anyway, I said, okay, well, listen, that's on you. But if it's a dream, I do not understand why you would say no. But that's between you and you. So I leave, I go back into the house, and his studio is a barn behind the house. And then the phone rings, and it's him. And he goes, you mean I can go? And I was like, yeah, babe. Are you asking me? If it's a dream of your life, who am I to say no? Now, of course, I was terrified. Do I want him to go to an active war zone? No. And if I told you the things that he experienced there, you'd be like, oh my God. But my reality was and is, I am blessed to be partnered with this human for life. Thank God. I don't own him. And the kids were grown at the time, but I remember one of our sons was like, how could you let dad go to an active war zone? And I was like, babe, I don't own dad. I love dad. He's the best. He's my person, but I don't own dad. And how do you think dad would feel about me if I guilted him into not doing something that was a lifelong dream? And then he had other embedments after that, but that was 2011, I think, or 2012. That was the first time. Anyway, I share that story because there's got to be, for me, sometimes it means respecting what the other person wants for themselves more than hanging on to your fear, of what will happen if they do, whatever that thing is. So emotional safety is not built in one grand gesture. We know this, right? It's built in 1,000 small moments that we experience: listening, following through, repairing, being honest, respecting boundaries, choosing curiosity over criticism. And these are all skills that you can learn. So I've included a lot of them in the guide, terricole.com/guide. I really hope that this episode of the Terri Cole Show, this part 2 of my 2-part series about emotional safety and security, really added value to your life. Thanks for sticking it out. This was a little bit longer episode than usual. I hope you guys have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.